Ordinary driver used to chauffeur the boss, until he spoke German with the investor and surprised everyone. Michael Johnson adjusted the rearview mirror of the executive Cadillac when he heard his boss shouting on the phone about the most important meeting for the company. The German investor would arrive any minute, and the multi-million-dollar deal depended on that conversation. That's when Heinrich Schmidt stepped into the car and politely greeted the driver in flawless German. Michael responded in the same language, leaving his boss, Richard Thompson, utterly stunned. The businessman, who had always treated him as invisible, now discovered that his driver of 15 years spoke fluently, a language he could barely grasp. The Cadillac glided through the chaotic traffic of New York City, while Richard tried to impress the investor with numbers Michael knew were inflated. The driver gripped the steering wheel tightly, listening to the lies that could cost 200 people their jobs at the auto parts factory in Newark. Heinrich Schmidt didn't seem convinced. His blue eyes analyzed every gesture Richard made, every document presented. Michael watched through the rearview mirror as the German's expression grew colder. When the investor began speaking to his assistant in German about canceling the deal, Michael's heart raced. "They're lying about the production capacity," Heinrich said in German to his assistant. "The numbers don't add up. Let's leave as soon as we reach the restaurant." Richard kept talking, oblivious to what was happening. Michael thought of his daughter Emily, who worked on the production line. He thought of Mrs. Williams, a widow supporting 3 grandchildren on her factory wages. He thought of everyone who would lose everything if this deal fell through. The decision that would change his life was made in a second. When they stopped at the traffic light on Fifth Avenue, Michael cleared his throat and said in impeccable German, "Excuse me, Mr. Schmidt, but I believe there's a misunderstanding about our actual production capacity." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard nearly dropped the papers in his hands. Heinrich leaned forward, intrigued. The German assistant raised his eyebrows in surprise. "You speak German?" Heinrich asked, fascinated. "Yes, sir. I learned during the many years waiting in the car. I had plenty of free time." Richard tried to interrupt, red with anger and embarrassment, but Heinrich raised his hand, demanding silence. He wanted to hear the driver. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out." Now, back to the story. Michael began explaining the company's real numbers. He knew every detail because he had spent hours reading reports left behind in the back seat. He knew the actual production capacity, operational costs, and profit margins. But most importantly, he knew about the wasted potential. The factory could produce 40% more with small adjustments to the assembly line, Michael explained as he navigated through traffic. "I studied lean manufacturing in my free time. I have a complete plan that could cut costs by 30% without laying off a single person." Heinrich was impressed. He asked complex technical questions, which Michael answered precisely. Richard tried to regain control of the conversation but was ignored. The investor wanted to know more about this extraordinary driver. "Where did you learn German so well?" Heinrich asked. "Apps, books, podcasts. I always dreamed of studying abroad in Germany, but..." Michael paused, the weight of his past pressing on him. "Life circumstances led me down a different path." The car arrived at the upscale restaurant in the Upper East Side. Richard hurried out, trying to separate Heinrich from Michael, but the German insisted, "I want your driver to join the meeting." "That's absurd," Richard exploded. "He's just a driver who speaks my language better than you and understands more about the business than you ever will," Heinrich retorted coldly. In the restaurant, Michael felt out of place in his simple uniform among the expensive suits. But Heinrich treated him as an equal, asking questions about his ideas. It was then that Michael mentioned the folder he had kept for years with suggestions for improvements. "Why didn't you ever present these ideas?" Heinrich asked. Michael glanced at Richard before answering. "I tried, several times, but a driver isn't heard in a company like ours." The conversation was interrupted by the unexpected arrival of Catherine Thompson, Richard's wife. Elegant in her navy blue dress, she seemed surprised to see Michael at the table. "Michael, what are you doing here?" "Your husband discovered I have some hidden talents," Michael replied with a sad smile. Catherine looked at her husband, then at Michael, and something shifted in her expression. Years of secrets seemed to weigh in her eyes. Hidden talents, she repeated softly. Or wasted talents. Catherine, not now, Richard warned. But she ignored her husband and sat at the table. Mr. Schmidt, let me tell you a story about Michael Johnson, one my husband would rather forget. The atmosphere grew tense. Michael tried to stop Catherine, but she was determined. 15 years ago, Michael wasn't a driver. He was the most brilliant production manager the company ever had, a production engineering graduate from Columbia, with a master's in management. He was the one who modernized our production line and tripled our profits. Heinrich stared at Michael in shock, who kept his eyes down. Richard was pale. That's in the past, Richard said through gritted teeth. The past? Catherine laughed bitterly. You demoted him to driver out of pure envy, because he was better than you, because the employees respected him more, because your father wanted to make him a partner. The revelation landed like a bomb. Heinrich demanded explanations. Michael finally raised his eyes, years of pain reflected in them. Mr. Thompson accused me of embezzlement, Michael said calmly. He could never prove it because it was a lie, but the damage was done. He gave me a choice, be fired for cause or accept the driver position. I had a young daughter to raise alone. I accepted the humiliation. And I have proof it was all a lie, Catherine said, pulling documents from her purse. I kept them all these years, invoices, statements, records. Michael was innocent. Richard tried to grab the papers, but Heinrich was faster. As he examined the documents, the German shook his head in disbelief. Why did you keep this for so long? Heinrich asked Catherine. Because I was a coward, she admitted, tears in her eyes. Because I was afraid of my husband. But today, seeing Michael here, having to prove his worth after all he's been through, I can't stay silent any longer. The restaurant seemed to freeze around them. Michael felt the weight of 15 years lifting from his shoulders, but also the bitterness of lost time. You knew I was innocent, he said to Catherine. All these years, you knew. Forgive me, she whispered. I know it's not enough, but I'm asking for your forgiveness. Heinrich Schmidt stood from the table. Mr. Thompson, I won't do business with your company. I don't invest in businesses that waste talent and reward mediocrity. Richard panicked. Please, Mr. Schmidt, the company needs this investment. 200 jobs depend on it. Then perhaps you should have thought of that before destroying the career of your best employee, Heinrich replied. It was then that Michael stood up. Mr. Schmidt, please don't cancel the deal. The people working at the factory aren't to blame for Mr. Thompson's mistakes. Heinrich studied Michael for a long moment. You're defending people's jobs, even after all you've been through. I know each one of them, Michael replied. I drive many of them every day. I know their stories, their struggles. They don't deserve to pay for what happened to me. The German investor made a decision. I'll make the investment on one condition. Michael Johnson returns as production manager. No, better yet, operations director, with full autonomy and reporting directly to me. Impossible, Richard shouted. I'm the owner. And you'll remain so, Heinrich said. But if you want my money, these are my rules. Michael has shown more knowledge and character in 1 hour than you have in years of false reports. Michael was stunned. After 15 years, life had come full circle, but there was something he needed to say. I appreciate your trust, Mr. Schmidt, but I need to think, and there are conditions. What are they? First, I want to implement a profit-sharing program for all employees. Second, create an education fund for training. Third, complete transparency in management. Richard was fuming with anger, but Heinrich smiled. I accept them all, and I'll make a better proposal. How about turning the company into a cooperative? We keep the structure, but the employees become partners. Catherine stood up. I support it, and I'll contribute my share of the company to the cooperative's initial fund. You can't do that, Richard grabbed his wife's arm. I can and I will, she pulled away. I've already spoken to my lawyer. The divorce will be filed tomorrow. I'm tired of living with a man who destroys lives out of envy. Richard's world was crumbling. In just a few hours, he'd lost control of the company, his wife, and all respect. Michael, on the other hand, saw a future opening up after years of darkness. "I need to pick up my daughter from college," Michael said, checking his watch. "Excuse me. Your daughter is in school?" Heinrich asked. "Production engineering at Columbia, full scholarship. I always tell her knowledge is the only thing no one can take from us." Heinrich shook Michael's hand. "We start working together tomorrow. And Michael, thank you for saving this business, even after everything." As he left the restaurant, Michael passed Richard, who sat broken in his chair. For a moment he pitied the man who had ruined his life. But only for a moment. In the car on the way to Columbia, Michael called Emily. "Sweetheart, I need to tell you something. Our lives are about to change." As he drove, tears streamed down his face. Tears of relief, of long-delayed victory, of justice finally served. 15 years driving through the streets of New York, chauffeuring the man who had humiliated him, studying in secret, learning languages, preparing for a moment he wasn't sure would ever come. Emily waited for him at the university gates. Beautiful at 23, she was the image of the mother Michael had lost too soon. Seeing her father in tears, she ran to the car. "Dad, what happened?" Michael hugged her tightly. "Remember when you were little and asked why I, an engineer, was a driver? You always said it was temporary. 15 years of temporary, sweetheart. But it's over. Today I got my dignity back." That night, in their small apartment in Newark, Michael told Emily the whole story. She cried with anger for what he'd endured, with pride for his resilience, with joy for the future ahead. "Why did you never tell me the truth?" she asked. "Because I didn't want you to grow up with hate. Because I wanted you to see me as an honest, hard-working father, not a victim. And because I always believed the truth would come out." The next day, Michael arrived at the factory no longer as a driver, but as operations director. The employees, who had known him for years, welcomed him with applause. Many cried when they heard the full story. Mrs. Williams, the widow he always drove, hugged him for a long time. "We always knew you were special, Michael. God may delay, but he doesn't fail." Kevin, the young man Michael had taught German during their travels, was emotional. "You changed my life with your lessons. Now I'll be able to use the language at work." The first weeks were challenging. Michael faced resistance from some managers loyal to Richard, but with Heinrich's support and the employees' backing, he began implementing the changes he'd dreamed of for years. The production line was reorganized, eliminating waste. The profit-sharing program motivated workers. The educational fund allowed many to return to school. Within 3 months, productivity increased by 40% without a single layoff. Richard, isolated in his office, watched the transformation helplessly. He tried sabotaging some initiatives, but Heinrich kept him in check. Catherine proceeded with the divorce and used her share of the company to expand the social program. 6 months later, during one of Heinrich's visits, the biggest revelation came. The German brought a team of auditors to evaluate the company for its transition into a cooperative. "Michael, we found something interesting," Heinrich said in his office. "You registered several process improvement patents over the years." Michael nodded. "In my free time, I kept developing ideas. I filed them on my own. These patents are worth millions. The company has been using your innovations without paying royalties. Legally, you can claim back payments." Michael fell silent. With that money, he could buy a majority stake in the company. He could have his full revenge against Richard. "What will you do?" Heinrich asked. "I'll use the money for the cooperative fund, so all employees can truly be owners." Heinrich smiled. "You never cease to amaze me, Michael." The company's transformation into a cooperative happened in an emotional ceremony. 200 employees became partners in their own destiny. Michael was unanimously elected president. Richard retained a small share, but with no decision-making power. On the day of the transition, Richard confronted Michael. "You ruined my life," he accused bitterly. "No, Richard. I rebuilt mine, and in the process, I saved the company you were sinking with your greed and incompetence. I was always the owner. It was my right to do as I pleased. Michael shook his head. A company isn't made of papers and machines, Richard. It's made of people. You never understood that. That's why you lost everything. A year after the fateful meeting at the restaurant, the cooperative was a success story studied in universities. Michael gave lectures on participatory management and overcoming adversity. Emily, now graduated, worked alongside her father, implementing new technologies. Heinrich became a close friend and brought other European investors impressed by the model. The old auto parts factory expanded, creating jobs and opportunities. Catherine started an organization to support wronged workers, using her experience and resources to give voice to those who, like Michael, had been silenced by power. During one of these lectures, at the same Columbia University where he had studied decades earlier, a young man asked, "Mr. Johnson, don't you feel anger for the 15 years you lost?" Michael thought before answering. "They weren't lost. They were years of preparation. Every book I read while waiting in the car, every language I learned, every idea I developed, it all prepared me for this moment. Injustice tried to break me, but I chose to grow stronger." And what about forgiveness? Forgiveness is freeing. I forgave Richard not for him, but for myself. I forgave Catherine because she found the courage to do what was right. I forgave myself most of all for accepting humiliation for so long. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. That night, Michael received an unexpected call. It was Richard, his voice choked up. "Michael, I'm in the hospital, a heart attack. I have no one. Catherine left me. My friends disappeared when I lost my power. You're the only person I truly know." Michael didn't hesitate. He drove to the hospital where he found Richard frail, hooked up to machines. The man who had once been powerful and arrogant was now just a frightened human being. "Why did you come?" Richard asked. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because, despite everything, we're human," Richard cried. For the first time in decades, he truly wept. "I wasted my life, Michael. I had everything and lost it to pride and envy." "There's still time to change, Richard." "There always is." During his recovery, Michael visited him regularly. He brought books, talked about life, about the choices we make. Slowly, Richard began to change. "I want to do something meaningful," he said one day. "I have knowledge, experience. I can teach young entrepreneurs not to repeat my mistakes." Michael supported him. Together, they created a mentorship program at the cooperative. Richard, humble for the first time in his life, shared his failures as lessons. Emily initially resisted. "He destroyed your life, Dad." "And I rebuilt it, my dear. Stronger and better. Hatred is a prison. Forgiveness is freedom." The program was a success. Young people learned not just management techniques but values. Richard found purpose in serving others. During a graduation ceremony for the program, Richard gave a speech. "I spent my life believing power meant having people beneath me. Michael taught me that true power is lifting others up. I wasted 15 years of his life and nearly 30 of mine. But I've learned it's never too late for redemption." Heinrich, present at the ceremony, whispered to Michael, "You didn't just save a company. You saved souls." The cooperative continued to grow. It became an international model for participatory management. Delegations from various countries visited to learn. Michael was invited to global conferences, but he never forgot his roots. Every day he made sure to talk with the workers on the factory floor. He knew every story, every dream. He implemented a program where executives worked 1 day a month in production. "Never lose touch with those who make the company thrive," he taught. 5 years later, during the cooperative's anniversary, a surprise awaited Michael. The employees had organized a secret tribute, videos of families thanking him for opportunities, testimonies of transformed lives. Emily took the stage. "My father taught me that education and character are our greatest wealth, that adversity can strengthen us if we choose to learn. Today, we're not just celebrating a successful company, but the victory of human dignity." The final video was from Heinrich, recorded in Germany. "Michael Johnson taught me that business is about people. that profit without purpose is empty, that a man can fall, but his essence determines whether he'll rise again. Thank you, my friend, for showing me the true meaning of leadership. Michael, moved, hugged Emily. Around him, 200 worker partners applauded. Catherine was there, now an ally in social transformation. Even Richard, genuinely transformed, clapped with tears in his eyes. "Speech!" everyone shouted. Michael stepped onto the stage. He looked at the faces he knew so well. He remembered the day he decided to speak German in the car, changing his destiny. 15 years ago, I was told I was just a driver, that I should know my place. I accepted the humiliation because I needed to survive. But I never accepted defeat. He paused, overcome with emotion. Each of you has a similar story. One of overcoming, of struggle, of dignity maintained against all odds. This cooperative isn't about machines or products. It's about proving that every human being has infinite worth. The applause was deafening. Richard belittled me, thinking he was punishing me. Little did he know he was giving me the chance to meet each of you, to learn that true wealth lies in the people we serve, not the titles we hold. He looked at Richard, who nodded humbly. Forgiveness turned resentment into purpose. Education turned humiliation into opportunity. Unity turned a failing factory into a global model. But most importantly, we transformed lives. Emily joined her father on stage. "This is Emily, my daughter. A trained engineer, she could work at any multinational. She chose to stay here because she believes in what we've built, because she knows success without meaning is just failure in disguise. Thank you to everyone who believed when I had stopped believing myself, who saw me beyond the driver's uniform, who chose to build rather than destroy. Our story proves it doesn't matter where you are today. What matters is where your determination and character can take you tomorrow." The celebration lasted well into the night. Michael moved among the groups, listening to stories, sharing joys. Mrs. Williams, now retired but always present, pulled him aside. "Michael, your mother would be proud." He hugged her. She had been like a second mother during the hard years. "You kept me from giving up so many times, Mrs. Williams. I saw your light, son. Even when you couldn't see it yourself, I knew God had bigger plans." At the end of the night, Michael and Emily drove home in the same car he had driven for 15 years. Now it was a relic, kept as a reminder. "Dad, what if you hadn't spoken German that day?" Michael smiled. "Every day I'm grateful for the courage of that moment. But you know what I've learned? Opportunity always comes to those who are prepared. If it hadn't been German, it would have been something else. What matters is never stopping learning, never stopping growing." And Richard? Did you really forgive him? Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, sweetheart, but it frees the future. Richard was a prisoner of his own pettiness. I was a prisoner of resentment. We both freed ourselves. Months later, Michael received an official letter from the German government. It was an invitation to receive an award for promoting exemplary trade relations between the United States and Germany. At the ceremony in Berlin, with Emily and Heinrich by his side, Michael accepted the medal from the ambassador. In his speech, delivered in perfect German, he shared his story. "A language restored my dignity, but it was character that kept me standing through the dark years. This medal isn't mine. It belongs to everyone who believes knowledge and integrity are worth more than power and money." The moved audience gave him a standing ovation. Back in the United States, Michael found a line of journalists waiting. The story of the driver who spoke German had gone viral worldwide. Offers for books, speeches, and consulting poured in daily. "I'll only accept what I can give back to the cooperative and to education," he decided. The book, From Driver's Seat to Leadership, A Story of Overcoming, became a bestseller. The profits funded scholarships for workers' children. The documentary about the cooperative won international awards. Richard, completely transformed, wrote his own book, Confessions of a Terrible Leader. He donated the profits to the mentorship program. In interviews, he never tired of publicly apologizing to Michael. "I spent decades being the villain of my own story," he said. "Michael taught me we can always rewrite our ending." Catherine expanded her organization nationwide. Thousands of wronged workers found support and justice. She and Michael became allies in the fight for workplace dignity. "My silence allowed an injustice," she would always say. "Now my voice will prevent others." The cooperative became a case study at Harvard. Michael was invited to teach as a visiting professor. Emily accompanied him, pursuing a doctorate in participatory management. One morning in Cambridge, father and daughter walked across the campus. "It feels like a dream, Dad." "It's real, my dear, as real as the difficult years were. The difference is we turned pain into purpose." "Any regrets?" Michael thought for a moment. "Perhaps waiting so long to act. But even that was a lesson. Sometimes we need the right moment, not just the courage." Back in the United States, a surprise awaited them. The workers had organized the creation of the Michael Johnson Foundation for Education and Workplace Dignity. The building, Richard's old mansion, donated by him. "It's the least I can do," Richard said at the inauguration. "This house was built with the sweat of workers. It's only fair it now serves to educate them." The foundation offered courses in languages, management, and technology, but also something more: dignity. Every worker was treated as a potential leader. Every janitor could become a director. Every driver could surprise the world. Michael kept a routine. Every Friday, he drove the old Cadillac to pick up workers, not out of necessity, but to remember. "Why do you still do this?" asked a young trainee. "To never forget that serving is the highest form of leadership, and that every person holds infinite potential waiting for an opportunity." The young man, the son of a cleaning lady, had tears in his eyes. "You saved my family. My mother could study. My siblings have a future. I saved no one. I only opened doors. You were the ones who had the courage to walk through them." Heinrich, during one of his visits, brought a proposal. "Michael, international investors want to replicate the model globally. We can transform entire industries." Michael accepted the challenge. The Global Cooperative Network was born, uniting companies that believed in participatory management. Within 5 years, there were 300 companies and 1 million worker partners. Emily led the expansion in Latin America. In every country, the same message: dignity has no nationality. During a global conference in New York City, Michael was honored. On stage, world leaders acknowledged his impact. But the most moving moment was when dozens of drivers stepped onto the stage. "We are drivers who learned languages inspired by your story," said their representative. "Today, many of us have our own businesses or hold leadership positions. You showed us that our uniforms don't define our future." Michael embraced each one. The Drivers of Knowledge movement had spread globally. Thousands studied during breaks, turning idle time into opportunity. Richard, present at the event, asked to speak. At 70 years old, unrecognizable from the arrogant man he once was, he said, "I spent my life thinking belittling Michael would make me greater. It only made me smaller. He turned my cruelty into fuel to change the world. Today, before everyone, I ask, forgive me, Michael, and thank you for teaching me what true greatness is." Their embrace symbolized more than personal reconciliation. It was proof that transformation is possible for everyone. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing, years passed. Michael, now with white hair, remained active. The original cooperative had become a billion-dollar corporation, but kept its values. Every decision went through a vote by the worker partners. Emily became president, elected by her peers. Michael became chairman of the ethics board. His office? A simple room, door always open. "Luxury is having peace of mind," he would say to those who found his simplicity odd. The educational program had already graduated thousands. Doctors, engineers, lawyers, artists, all from working-class families, proving that opportunity is what separates potential from achievement. One special morning, Michael received an unexpected visit. It was Richard's son, William, who had lived abroad for decades. "Mr. Johnson, I came to thank you. You saved my father. He saved himself by choosing to change. No, you could have destroyed him. You had reasons and means. You chose redemption. That transformed our family. William revealed he had returned to the United States to work at the foundation. "I want to dedicate my life to repairing the harm my family caused." The second generation was taking up the mission. Children of workers and children of employers, united by the common purpose of dignity. The documentary about Michael was nominated for an Oscar. On the red carpet, he brought Mrs. Williams as his guest. "A 90-year-old woman at the Oscars," she laughed. "Who would have thought?" "You deserve this and so much more," Michael replied. They didn't win the statuette, but the message echoed worldwide. Upon their return, the airport was packed. Workers from across the United States waited to embrace their hero. "I'm no hero," Michael repeated. "I'm just one of you who was lucky enough to find my voice." The voice. That was what changed everything that day in the Cadillac. The courage to speak when silence was expected, to show worth where they only saw subservience. Catherine created an annual award, the Voice of Dignity, for workers who transformed their realities. The first honoree, Mrs. Williams. "This woman," Catherine said at the ceremony, "kept Michael standing when the world tried to knock him down. She proved that sometimes angels come disguised as ordinary people." Mrs. Williams, moved, gave a speech that became historic. "I'm a simple woman. I just know God puts the right people in our lives. Michael needed someone to believe in him. I needed purpose after losing my husband. We saved each other." The cooperative model faced challenges: economic crises, resistance from conservative sectors, attempts at sabotage. But the network grew stronger in adversity. "Storms reveal the strength of roots," Michael taught. During a particularly severe crisis, when it seemed they would lose major contracts, the workers voted to temporarily reduce their own earnings to keep everyone employed. "No one gets left behind," was their motto. The move so impressed clients that not only were contracts maintained, they were expanded. Solidarity proved to be the best business model. Heinrich, now a close family friend, spent long periods in the United States. He had learned English and fallen in love with the culture. "Michael, you didn't just change your life. You changed my worldview. I came looking for profit and found purpose." Together, they wrote a book about the cooperative model, From Individual to Collective: How Dignity Transforms Business. It became a global reference in management. Emily married Andrew, an engineer she met at the cooperative. The wedding was held at the factory, with all the workers present. "It couldn't be anywhere else," she said. "This factory is our story." Michael, emotional, gave the father's speech. "Emily, you saw your father humiliated and chose to fight by my side. You saw injustice and chose justice. Now you're building your own path. But always remember, to serve is the greatest honor." Michael's first grandchild was born on a rainy December day. They named him Ethan, Messenger of God. "What kind of world are we leaving for him?" Emily asked her father, rocking the baby. "A world where a driver can change destinies, where knowledge matters more than last names, where dignity is a right, not a privilege." Richard, now part of the extended family, was a devoted honorary grandfather. He had completely transformed his life, dedicating himself to social causes. "I want Ethan to grow up knowing that people can change," she would say. That Grandpa Richard made many mistakes, but he learned. Michael's story inspired a TV series that traveled the world, but he refused to participate in the filming. "I don't want fame, I want impact. I want every worker to see themselves in this story and believe in their potential." The series was a success, sparking global debates about workplace dignity. Laws were changed, companies rethought their practices, universities established chairs on participatory management. On his 80th birthday, Michael was surprised with a celebration at the cooperative. Thousands attended. Messages poured in from every continent. The President of the United States was present. "You are a national treasure, proof that the United States can succeed when we believe in people." Michael, humble as ever, replied, "The United States has always succeeded through its people. We just needed to believe it." Emily read a letter her father had written to her as a child, saved all these years. "My dear, Daddy may just be a driver today, but you can be whatever you want. Study, learn, grow. Never let anyone tell you you're just anything. You are infinite. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Heinrich announced the creation of the Michael Johnson Chair in Humanized Management at the University of Berlin. So your philosophy can inspire generations worldwide. Catherine revealed that the foundation now served 100,000 families annually. Every story of overcoming is a brick in the world we're building. Richard's speech was the most moving. I had everything and was empty. Michael lost everything and was whole. I learned that success without meaning is guaranteed failure. Today, I serve those I once humiliated, and I've never been happier. Mrs. Williams, now a centenarian but sharp, gave the final blessing. I saw this boy cry in secret many times. I saw his faith waver, but I also saw his daily choice to keep going. Michael, you are proof that God writes straight with crooked lines. Michael took the stage one last time that night. He gazed at the sea of faces, each one a story of transformation. Today I turn 80. 55 of those years dedicated to this family called the Cooperative. If I could go back, would I change anything? Yes, I would have acted sooner. I would have believed in myself earlier. He paused, emotion clear in his voice. But I've learned that every moment has its purpose. My 15 years as a driver taught me humility, patience, and observation. Without them, I wouldn't be who I am. He looked at Emily, at Ethan in her arms, at the future. To everyone listening, you are not your job title. You are not your current circumstances. You are infinite potential waiting for the courage to shine. Speak when they expect your silence. Act when they expect your passivity. Surprise the world by being unapologetically yourself. The speech ended with a standing ovation that lasted 15 minutes. Michael hugged every person he could, whispering words of encouragement. That night, on the way home with Emily and the family, Michael asked to pass by Richard's old house, now the brightly lit, vibrant foundation. You know, my dear, sometimes life takes everything from us to give us what truly matters. What truly matters, Dad? Legacy. Not what we accumulate, but what we transform. Not what we keep, but what we share. Not what we achieve, but who we lift up with us. The car drove through nighttime New York City, the same city where a driver once dared to speak German and changed destinies. On the streets, billboards advertised the foundation's programs. In factories, night shift worker partners built their futures. In schools, the children of laborers dreamed without limits. Michael closed his eyes, grateful. The journey had begun with humiliation and injustice, but he had chosen to turn pain into purpose, knowledge into power, service into leadership. Dad, Emily called softly. Yes, my dear? Thank you for never giving up, for showing us that dignity is not negotiable. Michael smiled, shaking his daughter's hand. From the back seat, Ethan babbled his first words. The future had a voice, and it would speak all the languages of dignity. The cooperative kept growing, inspiring global changes. Michael lived to see great-grandchildren, to see his model replicated on every continent, to see a world where work uplifts instead of humiliates. When he passed at 92, he was working, reviewing projects for new cooperatives in Africa. Emily found him in his simple office, smiling, pen in hand. The funeral was the largest New York City had ever seen, not for pomp, but for love. Workers from around the world came to pay tribute. Kings and presidents stood beside janitors and drivers, all equal in grief and gratitude for his example. Richard, at 90, gave the eulogy. Michael Johnson taught me, it's never too late to change. That forgiveness frees the one who forgives. That serving is the only true way to lead. He's gone, but his voice echoes in every worker who refuses to be silenced. Emily took over the global leadership of the movement, with Ethan by her side, now an engineer and heir to the legacy. The third generation carried the torch with the same fire. On Michael's 100th birthday, the UN declared International Work Dignity Day. His story was taught in schools worldwide. But the greatest tribute came from the unnamed. Drivers who learned languages, janitors who became doctors, laborers who turned into entrepreneurs, each carrying the lesson, you are more than your job. Mrs. Williams, impossibly yet truly 115 years old, had the final word in his honor. Michael proved we don't need wings to fly. We just need the courage to speak when our voice can change the world. He spoke. The world changed. Now it's our turn. And so, the story of the driver who spoke German became a living legend. Not for the language itself, but for the courage to reveal that every human carries entire universes, waiting only for the chance to shine. In every corner of the world where a worker studies in secret, where the humiliated plan their rise, where dignity resists oppression, the spirit of Michael Johnson lives. Because he proved once and for all, we are not what others do to us. We are what we choose to do with what's been done to us. And when we choose knowledge over ignorance, service over power, forgiveness over revenge, we transform not just our lives, but the entire world. The black Cadillac still stands at the entrance of the cooperative, preserved as a symbol. A simple plaque reads, "In this car, a driver dared to speak. His voice still echoes. What's yours?" Thousands stop daily for photos, reflection, and inspiration. Ride-share drivers, especially, make pilgrimages. Many report life-changing experiences after their visit. Ethan, now director of the foundation, keeps his grandfather's tradition. Every Friday he drives workers in the historic Cadillac. During these rides, he listens to stories, spots potential, plants seeds. Grandpa said every encounter is a chance for transformation, he explains. We never know when our words will change a life. The cooperative model became a required subject in business schools, but Michael always insisted it wasn't about technique, but values. They can copy our structure, he'd say, but if they don't copy our respect for people, they'll fail. Companies that tried replicating only the form, without the essence, did fail. Those embracing the full philosophy thrived beyond all projections. Emily, at 60, received the Nobel Peace Prize for the movement's global impact. In her speech, she moved the world. My father was demoted to driver as punishment. He turned punishment into preparation. Today, millions live with dignity because one man refused to accept he was just anything. This award belongs to all who dare to speak when the world expects silence. The awards night coincided with the launch of the Michael Johnson Free University, offering free world-class education. The main campus, the old auto parts factory, transformed into a center of excellence. Richard, at 95, cut the inaugural ribbon. Here, I humiliated a man. Today, this place shapes leaders. It's the redemption possible when we embrace change. Catherine, also in her 90s but still active, led the world's largest worker protection program. Her famous phrase, "The silence of good people allows the evil of the bad," was engraved in labor courts globally. Michael forgave me, but I needed to forgive myself, she would say. Every worker we help is an apology in action. Heinrich left a billion-dollar legacy to the foundation. His will stated simply, "Michael taught me that money without purpose is disguised poverty. May these resources keep turning drivers into leaders." The cooperative's 100th anniversary was celebrated worldwide. Already, 10,000 businesses were part of the network, with 50 million worker members. The model had proven not only fair but also the most productive and innovative. Ethan, now a global leader at 50, maintained his grandfather's humility. His office? The same simple room, the same open door. Luxury is peace of conscience, he repeated the family mantra. His children, the fourth generation, grew up between the factory and the foundation. They learned that privilege isn't having more, it's being able to give more. You carry a last name that means something, Emily taught them, not for status, but for responsibility. The world expects from you what Michael Johnson stood for, dignity in action. And they lived up to it. Each in their own field, medicine, education, technology, but all with the same principle, lifting others up. The eldest great-grandson, Michael Jr., stirred emotions when he turned down a $1 million offer from a multinational to work as a school bus driver. "I want to start where my great-grandfather was humiliated," he explained, "to prove it's not the job that defines a person, but their purpose." While driving, he taught languages to children, identified talents, and changed futures. Within 2 years, his Educator Drivers program spread nationwide. One morning, an important executive boarded his bus. She was the daughter of one of the workers Michael had helped decades earlier. "Your family changed my life," she said tearfully. "My father was a janitor. Today I'm a CEO because of the opportunities you created." "Then keep the cycle going," Michael Jr. replied. "Find your drivers and help them speak." And she did, just as thousands did daily, worldwide. The Michael Johnson effect, turning humiliation into motivation, service into leadership, knowledge into revolution. In universities, the silenced voice theory became a field of study. Academics analyzed how talent is wasted by prejudice and how unleashing it transforms entire societies. But on the streets, the theory was practice. Doorkeepers studying law, cooks coding, security guards composing symphonies, each living proof that potential wears no uniform. Driver's Day became a global celebration of workplace dignity. Millions paused to thank those who transported them, but also to ask, "What's your dream beyond the wheel?" And dreams were revealed, supported, realized. A worldwide network of solidarity born from a moment of courage in a black Cadillac in New York City. Emily, nearing 80, prepared the fifth generation, not to lead by inheritance, but by merit and service. "The name Johnson isn't a surname here. It's a mission," she taught. "It means speaking for the voiceless, dignifying every job, proving no person is just their role." The original cooperative now stood as a historic monument, visited by millions. Guides told the story, but the most impactful were the original workers, still lucid, sharing memories. "Michael saw us as people when we were treated as parts," they said. "That changed everything." In the Foundation's archives, millions of documented stories, each one unique, yet all with the same theme. Someone dared to look beyond the surface and unlocked imprisoned potential. Governments adopted the Michael Johnson Index, measuring workplace dignity. Companies with high scores thrived. Those that ignored it withered. The market had learned, respect is the best business. But there was resistance. Sectors profiting from exploitation attacked the model. Fake news, lawsuits, sabotage. The network stood united. "Michael faced worse," they said. "If he won alone, imagine us, millions." And they won. Every attack strengthened the movement. Every exposed lie converted more supporters. The truth, as Michael used to say, always speaks loudest when it has the courage to express itself. On the sesquicentennial of his birth, Michael Johnson was declared by UNESCO an intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Not the person, but what he represented, the unbreakable dignity of the human being. Schools taught the Johnson method: observe hidden potential, create opportunities, celebrate transformations. Children grew up believing that every person is a universe waiting for respectful exploration. Ethan, now the patriarch at 80, kept the flame alive. His grandchildren and great-grandchildren spread across the world, each a beacon of dignity in their field. "We're not special," he repeated. "Michael wasn't special. He simply chose to act when others chose silence. Anyone can do that." And they did. Daily, globally, constantly. Drivers becoming ministers yet staying humble. Janitors becoming scientists yet remembering their roots. Workers becoming artists yet honoring manual labor. The real revolution wasn't economic. It was cultural. Work, any honest work, came to be seen as dignified. Knowledge was democratized. Respect became universal. Of course, the world didn't become perfect. Injustices persisted. Prejudices lingered. But now there was a model, a path, proof that change is possible. In the words of a contemporary philosopher, Michael Johnson didn't invent anything new. He simply showed what was always true. Every human being has infinite worth. His revolution was making the world believe it. And the world believed. Not completely, not uniformly, but enough for hope to defeat cynicism, dignity to defeat humiliation, knowledge to defeat ignorance. In every driver studying while waiting for passengers, Michael lives. In every worker who refuses to be diminished, Michael speaks. In every act of lifting another human being, Michael acts. Because he proved once and for all we are not our job titles, we are our courage to reveal who we truly can be. And when we dare to speak our truth, the world has no choice but to listen and transform. As he used to say, always learn, always serve, always surprise, because you are always more than they think you are. And so, the driver who spoke German became an eternal voice, echoing in every soul that refuses to be silenced. His message, simple and revolutionary: speak. The world needs your voice. End of story. And so we come to the end of this moving journey. Tell us in the comments, do you know someone like Michael who overcame prejudice and showed their true worth? Leave your like, subscribe and share to inspire more people.